Hello, my name is Xavier Robert, coming to you live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State. A very good evening to you. And today on Worldview, China declares decisive victory over COVID-19 pandemic, claiming the world's lowest death rate, although experts have questioned Beijing's data as the coronavirus surged across the country after largely being kept at bay for 3 years. Iran sees its most widespread anti-government protests in weeks after small crowds marched overnight in Tehran and a number of other cities. Hundreds of Syrians living in Turkey returned to war-torn country after last week's devastating earthquake. The details of these stories and more in a moment. First, on Worldview today, China has declared a decisive victory over the COVID-19 pandemic, claiming the world's lowest death rate, although experts have questioned Beijing's data as the coronavirus surged across the country after largely being kept at bay for 3 years. The world's most populated nation abruptly ended its zero-COVID policy in early December, with 80% of its 1.4 billion population becoming infected, according to a prominent government scientist last month. Though there were widespread reports of packed hospital wards and mortuaries, China recorded only about 80,000 COVID deaths in hospitals in the 2 months after dropping its curbs. Some experts say the actual toll was far higher, as many patients died at home and doctors were widely reported to have been discouraged from reporting COVID as a cause of death. Away from that, now Iran has seen its most widespread anti-government protests in weeks after small crowds marched overnight in Tehran and a number of other cities. Now, videos showed people chanting "Women, Life, Freedom," and "Death to Khamenei," a reference to the supreme leader. It followed calls to mark the 40th day of mourning for 2 men executed on protest-related charges. Now, Mohammed Mehdi Karami and Syed Mohammed Hosseini. The UN said they had faced unfair trials based on forced confessions. Protests swept across the country in September following the death in custody of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old woman who was detained by morality police for allegedly not wearing her hijab properly. Authorities have portrayed them as riots and responded with force. So far, at least 529 protesters have been killed and almost 20,000 detained. According to human rights activists' new agency, 4 protesters have been hanged since December, while 107 others have reportedly been sentenced to death or charged with capital offenses. Now, hundreds of Syrians living in Turkey have returned to the war-torn country after last week's devastating earthquake. The Turkish government has allowed Syrians with ID cards from the quake-hit Turkish provinces to leave for up to 6 months. The rule change has led to hundreds queuing for hours at border crossings. Almost 4 million Syrians have settled in Turkey since civil war broke out in their home country 12 years ago. Now, some survivors of last week's earthquake are making the trip to the crossings in an attempt to reunite with family members back in Syria, some of whom they have not seen for years. Now, many of those queuing have traveled with their families and large amounts of luggage, waiting for security personnel to allow them forward for processing. Meanwhile, the United Nations has appealed for more than $1 billion in funds for the Turkish earthquake relief operation, just 2 days after launching a $400 million appeal for Syrians. UN Chief Martin Griffiths, who visited Turkey last week, said on Thursday that the people have experienced unspeakable heartache, suggesting that they must stand with them in their darkest hour and ensure they receive the support they need. The February 6 earthquake has so far killed at least 36,187 in southern Turkey, while authorities in neighboring Syria have reported 5,800 deaths. Rescue efforts have continued in Turkey, but the number of people rescued daily has dwindled significantly. A teenage girl was pulled alive from the rubble in the province of Kahramanmaraş on Thursday, more than 10 days after a devastating earthquake hit the region. But such rescues have become increasingly rare. The 17-year-old was safely extracted from the ruins of a collapsed apartment block 48 hours since the 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck in the dead of night on February 6. Moving on now, New Zealand's Prime Minister says he expects there to be more deaths from a violent storm which killed 8 people and cut off hundreds of communities. More than 4,500 people have yet to be contacted after Cyclone Gabrielle hit on Monday, causing significant flooding and landslides across the North Island. Many cities and towns are also without power or clean drinking water. A national state of emergency has been declared, only the third in New Zealand's history. The storm damaged hundreds of mobile phone masts, and Prime Minister Chris Hipkins said many of the thousands of uncontactable people are likely to be found alive and well, but he warned that people need to brace themselves for more fatalities. Now, some 10,000 people are also estimated to be displaced. North Korea has threatened to unleash unprecedentedly persistent and strong counteractions if South Korea and the United States carry out planned military exercises in the coming weeks. Now, a spokesperson for North Korea's foreign ministry issued the warning before the annual Freedom Shield joint military exercises of South Korea and the U.S. and accused Washington of stoking tension by conducting earlier drills, which included U.S. stealth fighters and a B strategic bomber that can be equipped with nuclear weapons. The spokesperson reiterated a long-standing claim by Pyongyang that joint exercises between Washington and Seoul were preparations for an invasion of North Korea. Meanwhile, South Korea's defense minister has said his country's soldiers did not massacre civilians during the Vietnam War in the 1960s and indicated the government will appeal a ruling that ordered compensation be paid to a Vietnamese woman who was the victim of a shooting rampage blamed on South Korean Marines in 1968. South Korean Defense Minister Lee Jong-sup told a parliamentary committee that his ministry is certain there were absolutely no massacres committed by its troops during the Vietnam War, and the court decision damaged the honor of South Korean soldiers. The court ordered the government to pay 30 million won to 62-year-old Nguyen Thi Tha, who survived a gunshot to her stomach but lost 5 family members, including her mother and 2 siblings, after South Korean Marines swept through her village of Phong Nhi in central Vietnam on February 12, 1968. Thao said in court filings that she was just 8 years old when the massacre took place and that she was shot in the stomach by a South Korean soldier, requiring her to spend almost a year in hospital. According to U.S. military documents and survivors, more than 70 people were killed that day when South Korean Marines allegedly fired at unarmed civilians while occupying Phong Nhi and nearby Phong Nut. The rampage followed after at least 1 South Korean soldier was injured by nearby enemy gunfire. From the U.S., President Joe Biden has suggested that the 3 flying objects detected in North America's skies in recent days were harmless, saying they were likely linked to private entities or research. Biden told reporters that intelligence officials are still assessing the objects, but there was no evidence that they were linked to an alleged Chinese spy balloon that U.S. forces downed off the coast of South Carolina after it had traversed the country. The objects were found and shot down over the U.S. and Canada in the past week, but the 2 countries initially said they did not know the exact nature or origin of the aircraft, sparking questions and concern from the public and policymakers. The incidents came days after U.S. forces on February 4 shut down the alleged Chinese spy balloon, whose flight Washington called an unacceptable violation of its sovereignty. Beijing, which insisted that the aircraft was a weather research balloon that accidentally strayed into U.S. airspace, condemned the decision to take it down.
With the Canadian government, I spoke personally with Prime Minister Trudeau from Canada on Saturday, and just as critically, we acted out of an abundance of caution and an opportunity that allowed us to take down these objects safely. Our military and the Canadian military are seeking to recover the debris so we can learn more about these three objects. Our intelligence community is still assessing all three incidences. They're reporting to me daily and will continue their urgent efforts to do so, and I will communicate that to the Congress. We don't yet know exactly what these three objects were, but nothing right now suggests they were related to China's spy balloon program or that they were surveillance vehicles from other.
Meanwhile, federal authorities in the United States have promised to provide continued support to a small Ohio community where a recent train derailment spilled toxic chemicals into the air and caused a massive fire, raising serious concerns for residents' health. Michael Regan, an administrator with the Environmental Protection Agency EPA, told reporters that the department has not detected any levels of health concern in air monitoring conducted since the fire was put out. President Joe Biden's administration announced that U.S. Health and Human Services staff, including from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, also are going to Ohio to provide support. After the break, we have reports on Canada saying it will send Navy vessels to the coast of Haiti to gather intelligence as the Caribbean nation continues to reel from economic and political insecurity, as well as violence, much of it driven by organized criminal groups. Do stay with us for details on this and more right after the break. Many thanks for staying tuned. Now, Canada will send Navy vessels to the coast of Haiti to gather intelligence as the Caribbean nation continues to reel from economic and political insecurity, as well as violence, much of it driven by organized criminal groups. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced the decision at a meeting of Caribbean leaders in Bahamas on Thursday. Among the topics they discussed were the powerful armed gangs operating in the country, leading to widespread reports of murder, kidnappings, and sexual violence. The Canadian leader did not specify how many ships would take part in the effort or the duration of their mission. The announcement came during a meeting for CARICOM, the 15-member Caribbean trade bloc. Haitian leaders, including Prime Minister Ariel Henry, have previously requested military assistance from the international community to help curb the escalating violence, but some Haitians have pushed back against those calls, citing Haiti's long and troubled history with foreign intervention. Last Friday, United Nations Human Rights Chief Volker Turk also called for an international force to help end the island's living nightmare. Away from that now, Japan's new H3 space rocket has failed to blast off because two booster engines did not ignite following the successful ignition of the flagship space vehicle's main engine. During a live stream of the scheduled launch, the H3's main engine cut off after the launch countdown reached zero, leaving the 57-meter high rocket standing on its launch pod at the Tanegashima Space Center on Tanegashima Island in the country's southwestern Kagoshima Prefecture. Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency JAXA Nation Manager Masashi Okada said later at a news conference as he wiped tears from his eyes that the launch was aborted during countdown as a result of safety features that functioned properly. Okada said ignition of the main SE9 engine was successful, but the subsequent electric signal to ignite a pair of auxiliary booster SRB-3S was not sent after an unidentified abnormality was detected in the process. He said the problem was not related to the engines, but most likely an electrical system. If the launch had been successful, the H-3 would have carried Japan's ALOS-3 land observation satellite into orbit. The observation satellite, which JAXA said is a key tool for disaster management imaging, is also equipped with an infrared sensor designed to detect North Korean ballistic missiles. In business, Tesla has raised the prices of the performance and long-range versions of its Model Y mid-size sport utility vehicles SUV in China, according to its Chinese website. Information on the website showed that the electric car company raised the prices of the models by 2,000 yuan, that is $290 each, to 311,900 yuan, that is $45,360, and 361,900 yuan, that is $52,600 respectively. It is the second time Tesla has raised prices since it lowered prices of all Model 3 and Model Y cars in its second largest market by 6 to 14% in early January. The price cuts had stoked demand, but the bump for the Model 3 in China showed signs of diminishing. Sales of the Model 3 quadrupled in January after its base price was cut by almost 14%, but for the first week of February, sales were down by more than 2/3 from the end of January. Data from China Merchants Bank International showed. In contrast, Model Y sales held steady. Tesla also raised the price of the performance version of Model Y in the United States by $1,000 on Tuesday, while cutting the price of the rear-wheel drive Model 3 sedan by $500. Still in business, Thailand's economic growth slowed more than expected in the fourth quarter of 2022 as exports and manufacturing declined, but a rebound in the vital tourism sector should continue to boost the recovery this year amid weaker global demand. Data from the National Economic and Social Development Council (NESDC) showed that Southeast Asia's second-largest economy expanded 1.4% in the October to December period from a year earlier. On a quarterly basis, gross domestic product (GDP) contracted a seasonally adjusted 1.5% in October to December, missing expectations for 0.5%. Now, a council in Seattle has taken a historic step in the fight against caste-based discrimination by proposing the first-ever legislation in the United States to directly outlaw the practice. Sharma Sawant, Seattle's only Indian-American city councilor, said in proposing the legislation last month that South Asian Americans face caste discrimination in employment, education, and housing. She wants to expand the city's existing anti-discrimination policy to protect those targeted because of their caste. Now, the 2-millennium-old caste system is practiced in countries such as India, where Dalits, formerly known as untouchables, lie at the bottom of the hierarchy. Sawant says the proposed legislation, which goes to a vote on February 21, would help put an end to an invisible and unaddressed form of discrimination in Seattle, home to an estimated 75,000 Indian Americans. The caste system was officially banned in India in 1950, but it continues to permeate many aspects of daily life and has spread to diaspora communities in the West. Under this system, caste is imposed at birth and lower caste members are assigned menial work considered unfit for the upper castes. According to the first ever survey on caste discrimination in the US, conducted in 2016 by Equality Labs, at least 25% of Dalits in the country said they had faced verbal or physical assault, while 2 out of 3 reported being treated unfairly in the workplace. Many have called for stronger legal protections against caste discrimination. Samer, who spoke to media on the condition his last name be withheld, said he had kept his case a secret from his colleagues in Seattle's tech industry for nearly a decade for fear of discrimination. But in 2020, he decided to address the issue publicly in an online post. He believes the US must evolve to account for the biases imported by some immigrants. In a separate development, Taiwan says it has found the remnants of what appears to be a crushed Chinese weather balloon. And Taiwan's military said it had spotted an unidentified object drifting above Dongyin, a Taiwanese-controlled island off China's coast. It later found a crash site on a shooting range. The military added initial investigation suggested the remnants were part of a meteorological instrument. And finally, on Worldview today, actor Bruce Willis has frontotemporal dementia, his family has announced. In a statement on social media, they said it was a relief to finally have a clear diagnosis. The 67-year-old was diagnosed with aphasia, which causes difficulties with speech, in spring last year, but this has progressed and he has been given a more specific diagnosis, the family said. They expressed the deepest gratitude for the incredible outpouring of love. The family went on to say frontotemporal dementia is the most common form of dementia in people under 60. Willis became a household name in the 1980s and 90s after starring in blockbuster films such as Die Hard, The Sixth Sense, Armageddon, and Pulp Fiction. He has also been nominated for 5 Golden Globes, winning 1 for Moonlighting, and also 3 Emmys where he won 2. And with that, we wrap up our package for you on Worldview today. Do ensure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find on our website, spectrumtv.ng. My name is Xavier Robert, reaching you live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State, and you have been watching Worldview on Spectrum TV. Do enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.
Nigerian police, which is the only one allowed by Muslim. Our governors have to share police powers with the president as stipulated by the constitution. We do not have a federal government police force. We have the Nigerian police force, which shall be administered, organized, and supervised by the Nigerian police force.
No, my lord, I want to say something. I want to say something here. Perhaps it might also enlarge the scope of people who should be invited here for examination. My lord, if we cannot find those who literally murdered Abiola, who are those people who could be said to be the beneficiaries of the death of Abiola?
Rogers has linked you with some of the killings he did.
He never did.
He linked you with the attempted murder of Hebrew.
He did not.
My lord, the matters council is leading the evidence in our matters.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord, but we can't be talking about cases which are in court.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord. These cases are in court, my lord. I'm just reminding you, lordship.
My lord, sorry, my lord, I think I'll be in cross-examination.
Legally Speaking, a program that deals with legal issues and questions we face as citizens of this amazing country, Nigeria. Legally Speaking. Join us every Friday from 5 p.m.